Hello everyone, welcome back to part 10 of the mystery of the bevel blocks. If you have not already, please catch up on the previous episodes as we are building upon concepts brought up in those videos. So today we are going to look at a few sites in Turkey, and we're going to spend a little bit of time focusing on the site of Xanthos because there are a lot of weird things going on there and a lot of motifs that are on display, a lot of overlapping motifs, and we're going to see if we can spot some connections at that site. But first, let's look at this site, the Temple of Artemis. Now, I skipped this picture up the first time because I just saw a bunch of rubble and some really nice columns. I saw some square hole anomalies in the background, back here, up in the arch. So I thought, yeah, there might be something going on at this site. But I saw these Corinthian columns and I was like, okay, well that's got to be later. So there's probably not too much ancient going on at this site. But then I came back around again and I noticed this lady down here. And she's right next to a bevel block. How about that? There may be a few other ones in this little corner area. This lower foundation may all be bevel block. You can see more over here. So yeah, this is a connected site, at least the bottom portion, and maybe the cornice parts up here. And then what does that say about the rest of the site? Oh, there's a very interesting square hole right there. And look at this one. Goes over the base of the column. I assume that's one piece of stone. That's interesting. And maybe some other little anomalous holes over here, and maybe some other elements. And perhaps there was some more columns here, right? Or maybe this capital goes to one of those columns in the background. And of course you can tell that elements have been reused. Down here, a column drum fragment. And over here, more pieces. So, there is reconfigured elements at this site. That's an interesting stone. Perhaps square nubs on it. I don't know what that stone's about. Yep, but there's definitely some hallmarks at this site, and I think there is more to this site, but this was the only picture of this temple that I found that actually had the bevel blocks in the picture. That's what I was trying to focus on. So let's go back, and next, after this, I thought, okay, we're in Turkey. What's a famous site in Turkey that's gotta have them? Well, Istanbul, right? Constantinople. Very famous location. So the history of this dates back a long, long time, and there is lots and lots of conquering and destruction and rehabilitation and rebuilding, and this is a perfect example of it. I think the other picture may even be better. No, this zoom's pretty good. Okay, so right away, these lower elements, they are bevel block. Slender filler stones, these are original. I think this is all dry laid in the foreground. This lower element, someone might say, okay, this is rebuilt, perhaps, right? These two stones, mortar in between. This bevel block here does not appear to go there. There's a weird square anomaly here at the corner. Perhaps this lower piece is original, and this fill is just repair mortar on original blocks, and this configuration could be original. But this whole gateway, I believe, was original. These upper stones, the way they protrude, more than likely there was a nice chunky arch, just like some of the other sites we've seen. And then in the background, you can see all the brick, all the additions. Perhaps this lower portion is original. It looks really good, but it also looks weathered in spots, so perhaps this is later, or a recarving. But I'm going to say these older, larger blocks, these rougher blocks, these are more than likely the original site, or an element of it. So there's got to be more to Constantinople too, right? There's so many buildings that are built on top of, and been reconfigured over time. So there could be bevel blocks all over Constantinople and Istanbul. So going back. Here I thought was a pretty interesting picture. I believe, yep, this is still at Istanbul. Now, I don't know what to make of this, right? Bevel blocks as far as the eye can see. Now, each one of these looks to be about the same quality, the same age. But what to make of these, right? The arch is very nice, tightly fitted. Even they have a little bevel, I believe, on their corners. The undersides are very smooth, very well executed. So I don't know about these guys, but this does look very eerily familiar, doesn't it? I'm not sure if we want to call this original or a legacy, but this is pretty interesting. And then next, we're in Xanthos. Now, Xanthos is a really old and complicated site, so I have the Wikipedia page for it pulled up along with the Wikipedia page for the classic style, classical order. So we can talk about some of this stuff with the right terminology. But this was the first picture I found, and I had seen this site before in passing, but this is way before we were talking about this kind of stuff. And I just knew these things up here were weird, and some of these boxes around this site were weird. But I didn't realize there was so much going on at this site. So first of all, we're going to see bevel blocks down here on this arch. And I'm going to have to assume that both these arches are oldest and original. And most of this site down here in the bottom is actually original. These giant steps, this is there's part of a amphitheater. This site has a giant amphitheater. But this first caught my eye. I said, wait a minute, I see maybe trapezoidal elements, and I see these bevel blocks, and I see square holes. In this instance, it's in a column segment, and weathering, interesting weathering at this site, other square hole anomalies. So I was like, yep, this definitely connected site, and I wanted to look more into this. Man, that's amazing. That's still holding together. Also, this back here, amazing. That's still holding together. You can see really interesting elements back here. Some really nicely, finely dressed stuff. Maybe these blocks are the kind that have the lip of stone around the edge, the little cusp of rock, like we saw in the Temple of Menkaure. And I think they're also at Baalbek also. And there's a few, there might maybe another site that has those. But amazing site here. A lot to look at. So let's go back. And I forgot to mention, guys, that this site is a sister site or a twin city. There is Letoon and Xanthos. The other one, Letoon. And then there's also the site of Tlos up here. And you can see on the Wikipedia page where Tlos is and where Letoon is. Also part of Xanthos. So all these are really close to each other, and they're all, at least they all have Lycian elements. So we can talk about Tlos in a minute. I have some other interesting pictures of that site, but I want to go more into this Xanthos site because I find these guys in the background, these big tall elements, and there's more of these boxes scattered around. I find these things really interesting, the motifs on them and some of the anomalies. And it's funny how all this stuff kind of comes together at this site. So let's look at some of these hallmarks and see if we can spot some connection. So first, let's look at these rock cut elements. Now, I'm going to call them that because I don't know what else to call them. Now, if we were Wise Up, if we were talking to him, watching his channel, he would propose that some of this stuff was imprints, and perhaps this whole mountainside may be the remnants of an ancient city, or who knows, right? Who knows what these square indentations are in the mountain. And even up here at the top, right, these square indentations. Like, how would they have done this up here? And how would they have done some of these, the sheer cliff face elements where there's no place to stand, like scaffolding would have to be erected, or they'd have to rappel from the top. So, yes, some of this stuff is possible, but in other instances you see them just on the cliffside with nothing beneath, and it's a really really precarious feat, right? And they do it with equal execution everywhere. So it's just really impressive. The motifs again, right? We're going to see knobs, formal knobs, square, uniform, as a decorative element in this case, kind of like how the nubs were on the blocks at Athens. But this is all supposed to be rock cut out of one piece of rock. We see the incised motifs, like we see at Pomopunku and a lot of other Greek sites, right? And here you see them in a 4-panel execution, but other times, 3-panel, and then like 2-panel. Down here, 3-panel with 3 below, so that's 6 total. Another one with 6. So, lots of variety in the execution. Some of this stuff back here in this corner, I don't really know what's going on there. It didn't look finished, maybe, but I don't see a lot of the motifs there. It looks pretty plain. And then up here, I'm just baffled by this rock cut element, right? If this is rock cut and this was a start to another one of these, how are they doing this? How are they getting up there and carving this? Some of this stuff is really precarious. I know they could do scaffolding and rappelling and all that, yes, but it's just some of this stuff is really precarious work, and it's executed so well. And I find it interesting how the knobs form squares at the corners of the openings, kind of like what we were talking about at like the Greek gates and like the Ethiopian doorways and windows. The Darius the Great Tower has these, or at least has a motif like this. In this execution there's 6, and the bottoms of these have these interesting little upturned elements, and it really reminds me of like Japanese gates, and we're going to see some more examples of that where it's a little clearer, and we'll see what you guys think about that. Okay, I really like this picture, guys. So you can see right away, this is wild. This had to have been done with scaffolding or rappelling equipment, right? Because there's no shelf to stand on here. You can see maybe some square holes, and maybe some of this foliage is covering up square holes. So maybe there was some scaffolding. You see these square indentations up here, and maybe a little square hole there and a square hole there. Maybe some more. That's interesting. That could be spots where there was a scaffold. So that's possible. It's just, this is really impressive stone cutting, right? So the motifs to me are really interesting. You see trapezoidal doors, and you see incised motifs. This one's really damaged. This one almost looks intentionally damaged, like perhaps defaced, because that's way more that's unnecessary damage for just breaking into it. But this is a trapezoidal door with an incised stair-step motif that steps out at the top, like we see in a lot of the South American gates, like at Pomopunku and Tiwanaku. So that's interesting to me. You can see the columns, or what's left of them, or the Ionic style, the double scroll style. Now, if you look up on the Wikipedia page, I won't flip over to it, but you guys can go look at it if you want. They say that the Doric and the Ionic, they don't know which one came first. They both kind of came, they showed up both at the same time, just in different parts of Greece. So there's really maybe a dispute there on which one came first. But you see those in association with the Corinthian, the really nice flowery ones. We see those in association with some of these sites, but classically they're supposed to be attributed to a later person. So we will keep that in mind when we look at some of the capitals. But some other motifs that I find interesting about this one in particular are these. Now this is the only one of these that has these motifs, and they're really, you know what they remind me of? They remind me of the Amaru Muru gate in Peru and the T-shaped doorways at Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde. And I kind of harp on about this in a lot of the comments, but I think that there's some kind of connection with these things. There's something going on with the capital T shape. And it's funny because they're in inversion, right? And the tops, these are like a bevel block. They have, nubs on them, long, like formal nubs. But it's all rock cut. It's like it's simulating a bevel block. It's kind of funny to me. So what's going on there? I don't know. It's just a funny execution, a quirky execution that's unique to all of these. I don't even know what you call these upper elements, but these seem unique. I think a lot of these are actually unique to the little temple facades. Each one has a different motif. Some of them have animal motifs, and these little end pieces will be little monkeys and carved animals, and other ones will be like flowery motifs, like here on the Ionic Order version, there's flowery motifs. So some really interesting executed art in here that's pretty diverse. There's lots of different styles executed. Now, I don't know if we're going to presume that means it is a one after the other type situation, but a lot of these, the weathering on them, it all looks contemporary to me. Like a lot of this was done at the same time or a similar time. So here we see some really well preserved ones, but why are they in these rocks the way they are? Shouldn't these be more in like a level execution? Why would they be slanted? And like this, whatever happened to this site, these elements look like they broke off of a larger element to me. They just, maybe it's the way the guy's holding the camera, but it could be that these, because they're crooked, were originally level, but on a much larger outcrop of rock that has since crumbled. I find the marks on the side, let's see if we can zoom in on this one without breaking up the quality too much. These pick marks, we're going to try to make an album for those soon, where we see repeating pick marks, where it's too uniform to be human, executed by man, by hand, is what we're going to say. So anytime we see instances where it's too perfect to have been done by hand, and it's an out of place execution, we're going to try to point that out and put that in a separate album and see where those go, because that's a hallmark also that I don't believe anybody has picked out and searched on its own. We're going to look at some more examples of these towers. I want to focus on this lighter stone. In some instances, we're going to see art on it. In this instance, it has been weathered away, and you can see the weathering extends across both blocks. That's interesting to me, and the way that's weathered, that wouldn't have been, damage from being broken into, would it? I don't know what would cause that kind of damage. Some of this other corner damage, I'm going to say earthquake damage or weathering. If it had an image originally, I don't know about that. But let's see if we can find some more pictures of the tower. And again, I want to point out how some of these headers, they swoop out and they have this little extra flip, like flare to them. And you can see at the bottom they do it too. That's just an interesting motif to me, and it reminds me a lot of the Japanese gates have interesting, curved elements to them, and some of these executions, they just remind me of that. And again, you can see more pick marks. I don't know if you want to call those uniform or not. They look pretty uniform to me. And on these surfaces that you don't really see many pick marks, so the refinement here is really good, however they did that. So let's go to some more pictures of these towers. Yeah, there's two of them. One of them, what do you see right away? A knob, a huge square knob right there on one side, not in the middle. Why is that there? Was that an artistic element that stuck out that was carved? Was that for lifting and standing this thing up? I don't know. That's weird, right? And then you see there's the artistic panel here. And then you see a stair step top with this little block that has a little nub on it. We're going to see a better picture of that later, but it has one little nub on it. And then you look down at the base that it's on. It's a very large base. That's probably the biggest block in the picture. And then this is parts of the amphitheater around it. These are interesting blocks. But as for the towers, yeah, here's another angle. You can see it has another knob on the other side. So there's two, one on each side. And then here at the top, this stone has a little nub on it. That's interesting, right? So you can see people for scale. So these things are pretty big. And there's a lot of ruins around these. I don't know if these have ever been knocked down and resurrected. Who knows? But these are interesting elements. The stair-step motif over here on this one, a lot larger, chunkier. This is very thin. And this little structure, I don't know what you want to call this thing, right? It's a tomb. If you want to call it a tomb, then it's a sarcophagus. Or it's a little house made out of stone. And you can see that this one had knobs all over it. And a few of them have broken off here, 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 and here. You can see this one probably had 6 again on the front, and maybe 4 on each side of the roof part. And these were done for artistic purposes, I guess, right? Decorative purposes. Very interesting execution. This is all one rock, right? So that would be really delicate pieces to carve and to not break off. So you also see the way this thing is executed. It forms, the triangle above the lintel, above the trapezoidal. Maybe this isn't trapezoidal, but triangle above the squared off entryway. So that's kind of reminding me of the treasury of Atreus. And, those other sites like the Lion's Gate. That's kind of an interesting hallmark to think about. And let's see if we can find... Yeah, there's other versions of these, we'll call them sarcophagi, that are, these are really weird, aren't they? They might have had an upper element, like the other ones did. Maybe they're lids, if these are hollow inside. I haven't been able to find any pictures of the tops of these to find out if those other roof elements were separate stones that were lids. I'm assuming they were. And these bevels are where they locked into place, and they're so large to prevent people from coming and taking them off. But perhaps in this instance, the top was removed. That's the only thing I can think. But a lot of damage to the front of it too, like they broke into the front of it. You see a square hole anomaly there. You see these knobs. You see here, it's got an interesting extra element. Here has a little square hole anomaly at the corner. That's interesting to me, the way these don't really match and the processing is different on them. That's interesting. These are really impressive to me. You can see where it broke. So these mitered edges were, look how clean they are. Even across here, very, very nicely done, right? I don't know how they did that. That's very nice. And then obviously this is erosion or damage. What are we going to call this, right? This part of the stone, what's going on with these holes in it? You see this in other parts, in the front down here in this lower stone. I don't know what you call that kind of damage. Is that from water weathering? Wind weathering? I think I need like Robert Shocker, a geologist, to tell me there. I don't know. But then you see a piece broken out of here. What was that about? Was this stone nicer? Was there a slender filler stone there maybe? It was intentional to fall out, to keep the structure? I don't know. And then here too, that looks like a straight edge. Was that a spot where a small filler stone went in? That's interesting to me, right? I don't see some of this damage being natural erosion. It seems like some other kind of force was going on these things. Again, this one This one is really interesting. Let's look at this one close up and try not to ruin the quality here. But so you see the tower in the background and that damage I was talking about. And then down here you see this one has this top. I'm assuming this is a lid and this is a separate piece that can come off. And in this instance, I'm going to say that these knobs are for lifting this thing off. That's got to be what that's for. And when you go to Egypt and you look at a lot of those sarcophagi, and we're going to make another album just for Egyptian sarcophagi because I have a lot to say about those, especially the ones that are rounded like these, except it's a smooth rounded top with squared off ends. I call those the bed frame sarcophagi, and I've been droning on about those in the comment sections of people's videos for years, trying to get answers about those, and no one has any answers for me for those. And I don't know what the motif is about, and they're in association with a lot of these nubs and knobs, and they're really anomalous. I don't know the cultural attribution, and a lot of them I'm going to assume have carvings on them from later people coming and reinscribing them and repurposing them. I think that's what's going on with those Alexandria sarcophagi. Those have a very interesting shape to them. They're like a faceted shape, like an oval at the top, and they taper down to a square bottom, and they have faceted lids, and they have some very strange damage on those as well. And I think the ones that are inscribed have been inscribed later, perhaps. But we're going to look at some of the anomalies on this one, like this little square hole. How about that one? Let's zoom in a little bit more here and see if we can see that one without breaking down the image. And notice how the trim goes around it. How about that? And this larger knob, notice how the trim goes around that one. And up here as well, below the watermark, it does the same thing. Why? That's so odd to me, right? Why? And this one's diagonal. If it's diagonal, it definitely has to be an anomaly. Why? That's no artistic element, is it? I don't know. That's odd. That looks like a mistake in the processing. I don't know what that is. But this is a very interesting box. And I think we have a picture of another one without the lid. And it may be that other one from earlier. I believe it is. You see the damage on this lower rock. This has nothing to do with this rock. This is a completely separate solid rock. And this weathering through it, and it extends down here, this lower element. I want to say maybe propose lightning or electricity. That I know that's crazy, right? But perhaps. I don't know. I don't know what could be going on with some of this damage. I'm not a geologist, but that's just really strange to me, guys. Some of the holes in these things. And maybe it's just the rocks. There we go. Maybe this is just the rock that they're carved out of. And they're just like that. But man, that is really strange. And perhaps there's a hole up here. I still can't tell. It doesn't appear to have any light penetrating inside of it, so I don't know. So I don't know what those lids were about. If they weren't for getting inside of it, what were they for? If it was just a nice decorative element and they needed to make it out of a separate piece of rock for convenience, I could go with that too. So who knows with those things? It's really weird. And then you have ones like this. These are really strange. I think this might be one of the only ones like this. Man, this one is wild. It's got a lot of strange bevels on it, a lot of strange damage on it. These decorative elements at the top are really weird, the way they stick out. If this is original, I don't know. Maybe there was more that went the other way. And they have like a faceted shape with an oval top, maybe. Or maybe there was some more to it that broke off. Maybe these were carved in some instances, I found some that were carved into figures and faces. So I don't know who to attribute that to and to when. But then also at this site, we have really impressive arches and some really crazy stones. Look at this one. This corner piece, how polygonal it is and how rough it is in areas, but it somehow all fits together. And this one here, how it fits, and this one up here, that's really impressive to me. And again, look at this damage. I think it's very similar to the damage on those boxes. And is that just from the stone they're carved from? I'll go with that. You know, if anybody has a better idea, I think it kind of looks like some kind of crazy, force hit this place. But we'll go with, natural forces, traditional forces. So the fact that this thing is holding together is really impressive. These upper elements are interesting to me. They remind me of Baalbek and some other places where these top coping stones are just precarious again, hanging up here. And these look original. I don't think anybody else is climbing up there to put those back. And some of these stones are really big. This one over here, that's a megalith. And the one on the corner, that's a megalith. I don't know how thick some of these are, but I'm sure some of these are pretty large. Let's see. More instances of gates. Look at these bevel blocks. These are really nice. Very well done. Some hole anomalies. Polygonal, that's a little square filler stone at a corner. There was a cornice. I'm going to say this was an original element and this part broke off. So this was intended to have a cornice. So this whole thing I'm going to say is contemporary and original. So this is really well done. I don't know if you want to call this beveled to save time, because again, the bevels are so shallow. But if we want to say that, I'll go with it on this example. The arch is very well done. It's smooth and uniform. Nice elements at the bottom too. Perhaps a trapezoidal door. And then there's this arch, this gate, this door, this tunnel. This is really impressive. And I want to try to zoom in on this one a little bit to show some things. Now, we can propose maybe there's some square hole anomalies like here and other places in the wall. Other holes, it looks like erosion, weathering damage to me. Or perhaps, you never know about some of these sites, maybe gunfire. I don't know. Projectiles, ancient projectiles too. Who knows? Some of this damage. Natural features of the rock before they even carved it. The rock had those geological features in them. And then this area, just a completely different color stone. Same blocks. I don't know how to attribute that just from the weathering, maybe the rain, how it comes down and it keeps it off of this part of the structure. So we see it more in maybe what it originally looked like. It was a lighter color like this whole wall was. And then over time it has darkened and weathered. I'm going to assume that. That could be the case at a lot of places. And I need to differentiate that this could be a line of demarcation too for processing, but both these surfaces appear to have the same finish on them. So I'm going to say that's not what's going on here. This is just the coloring is what's doing this. The stain is doing this. But I'm going to say at the Kalabsha temple that's not what is going on. That something else is going on there. That is definitely a line of demarcation between smooth stones and beveled stones. And the smooth stones are underneath one of these, and the beveled stones are on the outside. So what's that about, right? So who knows what's going on there? And like at the entrance to the Menkaure pyramid, who knows what's going on there? I don't know how that was done, or what the intention was there. But this is obviously staining and perhaps just the way it was carved, it makes these elements stick out and look different in color and everything. So again, you see the triglyphs along the top. And who knows, there may have been more to the top of this. I'm not sure. I didn't see much rubble around the base of this one. But again, a lot of it could have been carted off. And then it has things like this giant amphitheater with polygonal trapezoidal elements. And these blocks are really impressive. The wall, the structure behind it is really impressive. Another angle. Elements down here like coping pieces maybe. So this is really crudely built. You could say it's not very uniform. It's not very nice looking. If you didn't see the top part, that's the amphitheater, you would assume this is South American. But this is a very interesting amphitheater. These seats are all, like the amphitheater at Andriaki. The stones are all very big and mitered, and they have a part for walking and a part for sitting. So, and they also have, let's zoom out here. They also have metal clamps, and I believe this might even be an original metal clamp. What kind of metal that is? That looks like iron to me. Maybe it's an old bronze or something like that, but I'm going to say that's iron. And they have nice roads. These paths, these roads, these blocks are very nice and almost uniform. Some of them are a little bit different in their dimensions, but they all form a very nice straight, fairly level surface. So that's Roman level building, I would say. Romans could build very good roads, allegedly. Here's an interesting feature of this road. A gutter system. That's nice. And the way the stones have been beveled to accommodate whatever, maybe that was, they had terracotta elements or copper elements. Drainage system. That's interesting. And then writing. They have interesting writing at this location. Again, you see this weathering in the stone. Now, here's where I'm just confused, because if someone was going to take the time to write in one of these stones, why would they pick a stone that has all these holes in it? Was this stone like this before they started writing on it? Is this subsequent weathering afterwards? Because if there's weathering going on like that, shouldn't the rest of the inscription be obliterated? I mean, yeah, it is pretty weathered, but man, I don't know. I'm either way on that. That could be before, or it could be after. And the writing, I don't know. Someone can fill me in on that. There's a lot of things, cultural things about these sites that you'll have to fill me in on, because I haven't looked into all those connections. But some of these elements, like the floors maybe, perhaps these motifs are original. And of course we see like spiraling motifs that go all around the world. But we also see, look here, this is like an Andean cross, right? These diamond-shaped motifs. I find that interesting. I mean, how else could two cultures across the world come up with the same pattern? And you'll see in textiles from the South American cultures, they'll have this exact same motif, and perhaps they even have some of these other motifs too. Just really impressive that this stuff is still here for us to look at. I'm going to say a lot of this stuff is original, or if it isn't, this encodes a lot of legacy motifs, right? And they all knew about something. They all knew about these patterns. And again, here, very interesting weathering on this block. And Shermanator Osborne had a really great insight about some of these blocks, and how you'll see some of these surfaces that are recessed, that are really rough. They're not just rough. They may have had, art, or maybe they are art. And in this instance, perfect example, you see where the recess has been used the whole out of the block for art. And this more than likely is original with the block. Interesting motifs, the twin lions. And you'll see some more instances of twin lions. And the weathering again is just really, this wouldn't be like this before they carved into it, right? They wouldn't want that to happen. Or did they, because of the way this was? Did they say, oh wow, that's really cool, let's make that our block so it looks like blood? That's just interesting to me. I don't know what's going on there. Who knows? And a different angle. This is a very large block. I don't know. More motifs. A triangle motif with an incised gate. And these are, I'm going to assume, twin lions. And this is interesting. Sphinxes. Okay, let's try to get through the Tlos site, and then we'll close up because we're getting close to an hour here. Let's point out some things like we saw at Xanthos. The rock cut elements, those look very similar. You see the structure on top, the rubble built structure, mortar, much lighter, much more inferior. Then down here, these column segments, obviously repurposed for this wall. I find the square holes interesting, right? Sometimes 5, sometimes 4. Here there's 2, most of them have 2. A central one and a perimeter one, I guess to line them up for whatever reason, or to keep them from rotating. Interesting. Maybe to line them up with artistic elements. That's what I'm going to assume. Here's an interesting structure at Tlos. I wanted to point out at this structure. Look at this giant block above the arch. Who builds like that? Who makes an arch, and who is so confident in their arch that they put this giant stone right above the middle of the arch? That's really impressive to me. And I'm going to assume that this structure is original. Maybe some elements have fallen out and they put pieces back in. Foliage may be growing in some square holes. You see a lot of square hole anomalies. Here, here, let's see, here. And I believe I saw it, yeah. There. Here with a filler stone. Here one at a corner. Here's another one. Very interesting, right? What's going on with these square holes now? I really don't know. Oh, and yeah, let's wait for my zoom box to go away. Yeah, look at all those over there. Those filler stones, that row across. That's interesting, right? What's going on with those? So, very strange. Maybe conglomerate site, conglomerate structure because of this rubble on top, but who knows? This could just be fill for some concrete, cement thing on top. Who knows? I really don't know. Could be contemporary, could be later. Again, here. This could be later, this could be contemporary, I don't know. But if you zoom in, you will see that these are bevel blocks. And what's going on with these square holes? Some of these are just indentations. There's a row of them, a line of them. And we're going to start seeing some more of these at this Tlos site. And I really don't know how to explain these. And then if you look really close, you see all these tiny little square holes, these little indentations in the blocks, and you zoom out, and they're in every single block. That's not just little. I mean, is that just little holes, like geological holes, or are all those little square holes in all the blocks? I'm not sure there. And also, let's point this out. Look at this giant stone. Again, that's a very confident builder that puts a giant stone like that above for their arch. And here it's very roughly put together, right? It all turns out nice, but all these blocks are very rough. Back here, they're very formal, even though there are polygonal elements. Right? Down here again, polygonal elements. Strange, the juxtaposition, right? How do we reconcile that? Look at that one. That one's very nice. Can't believe that one's still holding together. And at first I wasn't sure. Another one I passed up. But you zoom in, and the bottom courses, these are all bevel blocks. Very smooth undersides. Very nice execution. Very formal. Amazing they're still holding together. And then you see in the background, right? You see all the rock cut and other elements of this place in the background. Here, look at these square holes. What do we make of these? I don't know what to make of these. These are amazing. These are artistic, I guess. An artistic decorative execution. How is this done? And why was this done? Was it for attaching sculptures and statues and decorative things? That's the only thing I can think of. We see a filler stone here. What's that about? Was that where a piece of a remnant of what was attached is left? Or was it just a filler stone? I really don't know. What are these about now? That's really strange to me. And this next picture, we're going to see an even better example. Look at this. This is really impressive. The whole entire inside of the arch has these and larger square hole anomalies. What's going on here? Well, what are these about? This is the only site that has these executed like this. I'm confused by those. It's very interesting to me. Again, that wall is still impressive as well. A little small filler stone. Yeah. And then next, here's a really interesting site. Another one I passed up. Algeria. At first, I didn't see anything. I saw Corinthian columns. I saw some old-looking stones. Then over here, yep, these are all bevel blocks. This whole structure in the foreground is bevel blocks. And perhaps these elements are all contemporary. I don't know. But these are really impressive. They're huge. They're very polygonal, or very irregular. There are polygonal ones. Here's a small filler stone. What's that about? And this one? Some of these bevels, very strange on the corners. And then very large protrusions on the top. Very roughly thrown together structure. Whatever this thing was. Perhaps this is reclaimed elements and recarved elements. Very impressive though. And we'll close it up here, guys, with this amphitheater in Timgad, Algeria. This one was really interesting to me. At first I didn't see them. Some of these were starting to get hard to spot. I had seen most of the obvious examples in the other sites. And here they're very faint, but you can see that these lower blocks are bevel blocks. These columns are ancient, unbelievably damaged. And then these flanking stones again, this railing that goes around. Interesting. Same execution of the stairs and the seats. And these blocks over here, the quality of the picture, I can't zoom anymore for the quality will break down, but I'm going to have to assume that these, just like it's going to be a similar execution like the one at Andriaki. You have this corridor, and these blocks are all bevel blocks, and more than likely there was an arch for an entrance into this lower area. We'll close it up there, guys. We're going to go into some more sites in Turkey after this, and I've added some more sites to the top of the list, so we're going to try to get this done in a couple more episodes, and then we're going to move on to some different hallmarks, and I'll start fleshing out some of those other albums, and we'll start looking at some other sites in some different areas of the world we haven't looked at. We haven't looked at any sites really in Egypt except Karnak and the Kalabsha Temple. And I also want to mention those sarcophagi again, those bed frame sarcophagi. No one's really talking about those. Those things are really strange to me. I don't get the cultural context of those. And some of them are inscribed, other ones are not inscribed. Some of them appear to be broken and damaged. There's some really finely dressed ones, like at the Headless Pyramid, for example. The lid is the only piece left, and it's upside down and toppled in the sand. And there's a few examples in museums that are inscribed, that are in, okay condition. They're very weathered. Some other ones that are still at the sites that appear damaged also. Just some weird things going on with those sarcophagi. So we're going to add some of those boxes at Tlos and Xanthos. We're going to add some of those boxes to that list because that's the only thing I know to categorize them as. And I might even add the Tomb of Cyrus the Great, that little box. I might add that as well. We'll just have a sarcophagi album. So thanks for hanging out with me today, guys, and we will talk to you next time.